There is a rule that seems so universal, so utterly reliable, that we barely notice how often we depend on it. It's the invisible operating system behind weather forecasts, population growth, internet routing, financial models, disease spread, and even the way ideas move through a community. You use it unconsciously every time you predict anything. And what's strange is that the rule works astonishingly well until suddenly it doesn't. Most of the time, the world behaves in patterns. Trends continue. Lines move predictably. If something increases, it keeps increasing. If something stays stable, it tends to stay stable. If something falls apart, it usually falls apart gradually. The rule behind all this is so deeply baked into our brains that we treat it as common sense. The future will look like the recent past. That assumption is the backbone of modern life. And yet, history is full of moments when this rule violently fails, when systems snap, flip, or transform so abruptly that even experts are left stunned. Ecosystems collapse overnight. Markets crash in minutes. Stable societies unravel in years or even months. Materials behave perfectly until one tiny change makes them catastrophically fail. So what is this rule? Why does it work so consistently for so many things? And why does it fail so catastrophically for others? And why, when it fails, do we almost always fail with it? To explore that, let me show you something simple. Imagine a single droplet of water forming on the tip of a leaf. At first, it sits there, steady, gently swelling. You could watch it for 20 seconds and predict exactly what it is going to do for the next 20, grow a little bigger, wobble slightly, stay attached. That's the rule in action: slow, continuous, predictable change. But then, with no warning, the droplet breaks loose and falls. Not gradually, not almost, instantly. A sudden shift after a long period of stability. That one moment, that sudden drop, is where prediction dies. This moment appears everywhere: in physics, in biology, in social systems, in engineering, in algorithms, in human behavior. There's a hidden process that makes things stable for long periods and then suddenly unstable. A process that follows the rule until it doesn't. And once you notice that pattern, you start seeing it everywhere: in stock bubbles, forest fires, viral videos, earthquakes, immune systems, friendships, and even in your own habits. Here's the twist: most of us think unpredicted change is chaos, but it isn't. It's not randomness. It's not an accident. Often, it's the inevitable result of the rule itself. Today, we're going to explore why the most powerful rule for predicting the world is also the one most likely to deceive you. And by the end, you'll see why the moments when everything stops making sense might be the most meaningful moments of all. To understand why this rule feels so trustworthy, we need to step back and look at something fundamental about how humans experience the world. We live inside a stream of moments that flow smoothly into one another. Day becomes night. Winter becomes spring. A child becomes an adult. A trend becomes a pattern. Nothing around us seems to jump violently without warning, at least, not most of the time. Our minds evolved in this environment of gradual change, so we became experts at spotting continuity. If a tree dropped apples every fall for 20 years, you assumed it would do so again next fall. If you walked through the same path every day and never saw a tiger, you assumed today would be the same. This rule wasn't just convenient, it was necessary for survival. Creatures that could forecast tomorrow based on today were more likely to eat, avoid danger, and pass on their genes. But here's the problem: this built-in rule of the future resembles the recent past, works best in environments that are stable, slow-moving, and simple. And for most of evolutionary history, that was true. But today, the world we've created for ourselves is nothing like that environment. Consider modern systems: financial markets, global supply chains, climate feedback loops, political polarization, viral outbreaks, internet information flows, brutal engineered structures, high-speed algorithms that react in milliseconds. These systems aren't slow or simple. They're fast, interconnected, non-linear, and sensitive to tiny changes. And these systems don't always behave gradually. They behave like the water droplet: stable, stable, stable. Then suddenly, snap, a phase shift. And yet, our intuition hasn't updated. We still expect slow change. We still trust trends. We still assume stability is permanent. That's why we're shocked by events that, in hindsight, were inevitable. Banks collapsing, ecosystems passing tipping points, online misinformation exploding, peaceful communities suddenly destabilizing, a single video going from 200 views to 20 million, overnight materials tearing apart after a barely noticeable crack, and individuals' seemingly sudden burnout. In each case, the system looked normal until it wasn't, and the breakdown wasn't random. It was the result of forces building quietly beneath the surface, forces the rule had helped us ignore. To see this clearly, imagine turning up the heat under a pot of water. For a long time, almost nothing happens. You can stare at it and predict the next few seconds perfectly, tiny bubbles, a shimmer, a slight vibration. Then, suddenly, it transitions into a rolling boil. The change feels abrupt because we only see the visible state, not the accumulation of energy underneath. Modern systems behave the same way. They accumulate hidden stress, hidden interactions, hidden amplifications. Everything looks stable until a threshold is crossed. At that moment, the rule that explains almost everything becomes a trap. But what exactly is this rule? Why does it arise so naturally in our thinking? And why is it so dangerous in a world built on connected, accelerating systems? To answer that, we need to isolate the rule, trace its origins, and see how it shapes our understanding and misunderstanding of reality. To uncover this rule and why it fails, we need a story, not about people or markets or ecosystems, but about something much simpler. Something so stripped down that the only thing left is the core idea. So imagine a blank world. No cities, no forests, no oceans. Not even matter, just a flat mathematical landscape where we can place objects and give them rules. In this space, time moves in steps, tick, 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 and on each tick, everything updates according to whatever rules we choose. Let's begin with the simplest inhabitants possible, tiny digital creatures I'll call walkers. A walker has only one property, it moves forward one step every tick. That's all. No choices, no randomness, no surprises. If a walker is at position 5 now, it will be at position 6 next, then 7, then 8. Perfect consistency, perfect predictability. If this were our universe, the rule the future looks like the recent past would be flawless. Everything behaves exactly as it did before. You could predict the next 1,000 steps with absolute certainty. And at first, that's exactly what happens. Our walkers march along, forming neat lines, drifting across the grid like clockwork. Now let us introduce a second rule. If two walkers collide, meaning they try to enter the same space at the same time, they merge into a single, larger walker. This new walker moves twice as fast. Suddenly, the world becomes slightly more interesting. At first, nothing seems to change. Collisions are rare, so most walkers continue in their predictable march. Our rule still seems unbreakable. Based on what we've seen recently, the future looks exactly the same. But after a while, something starts to happen. Faster walkers begin catching up to slower ones. Mergers become more frequent. The world, which once looked so orderly, now has pockets of sudden acceleration. A tiny difference, just a few early collisions, starts compounding. By the time we reach tick 500, the grid no longer looks anything like it did at tick 100. Predictability begins to slip away. Patterns appear, then vanish. Speed clusters form. A runaway giant walker devours everything in its path. The rule held for a long time, but then it didn't. What's important isn't the walkers themselves. It's that a tiny change in rules introduces feedback, and feedback transforms predictability into something more fragile. A world that once obeyed simple extrapolation now contains tipping points, runaway growth, rapid transitions. But that's just the beginning. Because the moment we introduce even one more rule, competition, decay, reproduction, randomness, constraints, the system becomes dramatically more complex. And the more complex it becomes, the more the rule misleads us. We're going to gradually build this world, layer by layer, because each layer brings us closer to understanding why the same hidden structure sits beneath real-world systems, economies, climates, crowds, social networks, pandemics, trends, ideas. In each case, the transition from predictable to unpredictable happens for the same fundamental reason. And once you see that reason clearly in this simple toy universe, you'll start recognizing it everywhere. But to reach that point, we need to add just one more ingredient, one that changes everything. Let's return to our digital world. So far, we have walkers that move forward one step at a predictable pace, and we've added a rule that when they collide, they merge into a faster walker. That alone gave us a glimpse of how predictability can erode when feedback enters a system. But now we are going to add a rule that transforms our world from a predictable toy universe into something that behaves strangely like the real one. The rule is simple. Every walker leaves behind a trace. Imagine that whenever a walker moves, it drops a tiny marker like a breadcrumb on the square it just left. These markers accumulate. They don't disappear unless something removes them. They just pile up, step by step, creating a faint history of everything that has passed this way. But why would breadcrumbs change anything? Because the next part of the rule is this: walkers are attracted to places with more trace. A walker doesn't consciously choose its path. It simply checks the squares around it and moves toward the one with the most accumulated trace. In other words, walkers follow where other walkers have walked before. This is the simplest possible form of positive feedback, and feedback, positive or negative, is the death of simple prediction. In the first few ticks, nothing dramatic happens. Walkers still move mostly forward because the traces are evenly distributed. They follow the rule we're familiar with, more of the same. The future looks like the recent past, but very quickly, something changes. A small group of walkers happens to overlap slightly, leaving just a bit more trace in one location. Another walker passes nearby and senses this faint bias. It moves toward the slightly more crowded spot, adding its own trace to the growing line. This creates a tiny channel of higher density. More walkers drift into it, strengthening the channel even more. What we're watching is the birth of structure, not imposed from above, but emerging from the simplest rules imaginable. Soon, our landscape begins to form valleys of high trace density. Walkers bunch into lanes, reinforcing the paths they take. Not because they're intelligent, because the rule makes the path self-reinforcing. The more walkers pass through, the more attractive the path becomes. And once a path dominates, it captures almost everything. If this reminds you of traffic patterns, herd movement, social media trends, or even chemical reaction pathways, that's not an accident. Many systems with simple microscopic rules generate complex macroscopic behavior. But here's the twist: as the lanes form, the world becomes predictable again. For a while, you can point to a lane and say, walkers will follow this path, and you'll be right until something unexpected happens. A random collision, a new lane forming by chance, a large walker plowing through an established route. At some threshold, the system flips. Suddenly, the old path is abandoned. A new one rises. The system rearranges itself. Prediction holds. Prediction fails. A new pattern emerges. Prediction holds again. This oscillation between order and chaos is the signature of systems that obey the rule until they don T. Now that the simple model is alive, we're ready to introduce the element that makes it behave uncannily like real-world systems. It's the element that pushes stable patterns toward instability, and that makes tipping points inevitable. Now that our walkers leave traces and follow paths of higher density, we see something remarkable. The system is no longer just moving forward. It remembers. It amplifies. Every past step shapes every future step. And here is the subtlety: the very mechanism that makes the system predictable also contains the seeds of sudden upheaval. Think about the channels forming in our digital world. At first, the most obvious path dominates. Walkers converge, flow neatly, and the landscape looks stable. You could bet on which route a walker would take next. But remember the hidden variable: feedback. Each path grows stronger as it's reinforced, but this growth is not linear. Small differences compound exponentially. A tiny initial advantage becomes a runaway effect, while other paths wither. This is the essence of positive feedback. The more something happens, the more likely it is to happen again. It's why a snowball grows as it rolls. Why rumors spread faster once a few people start sharing them, and why markets accelerate before they crash. Feedback is invisible until it reaches a critical mass, and then it becomes impossible to ignore. As the walkers move, channels that seemed permanent suddenly collapse. Why? Because the system has thresholds. There's a limit to how much density a path can handle before it becomes unstable. A collision, a sudden burst of walkers, or even a slight random fluctuation can push a well-established channel past this tipping point. In one tick, the dominant path disintegrates, and walkers are forced to find new routes. Predictable yesterday, chaotic today. The future that once mirrored the past no longer exists. We see this in every complex system around us. Forests accumulate fuel until a fire ignites. Economies build leverage until a crash occurs. Social networks develop trends that explode or vanish overnight. Climate systems store energy until thresholds trigger hurricanes or droughts. In each case, the rule the future will resemble the recent past holds until the tipping point. And the tipping point, hidden, invisible, silent, is exactly what the rule can't anticipate. What's fascinating is that the system's behavior is not random. The collapse of a path, the explosion of a trend, the outbreak of a wildfire, they all follow deterministic rules. If you had full information about the walkers' positions and traces, you could, in theory, predict the tipping point. But in real-world systems, that information is scattered, noisy, or simply too complex to track. So we rely on intuition, we extrapolate from recent trends, and that's when we are most likely to be fooled. Here's the takeaway. Complexity doesn't break the rule, it stretches it. The rule works beautifully in ordinary conditions. It becomes misleading only when feedback, accumulation, and thresholds combine. The very structure that creates stability also contains the seeds of instability. In our digital walker world, we now see the cycle clearly. Stable paths emerge, reinforced by feedback. They dominate for a while. Then, past a tipping point, the landscape shifts and a new path forms. Predictable, unpredictable, predictable again. It's a dance between order and chaos. Next, we'll see how adding even a small amount of randomness, tiny errors, unexpected events, or external shocks magnifies this effect, turning our simple model into a mirror of the unpredictable yet patterned world we live in. So far, our digital walker world has been orderly in its unpredictability. Paths form, feedback amplifies them, tipping points emerge, but there's still a subtle predictability. We can see the channels, trace their growth, anticipate which path might dominate next. Yet, the real world is rarely so neat. There's one ingredient we haven't added: randomness. Imagine now that every tick, a tiny fraction of walkers make a mistake. One step too far, one step too short, or occasionally they jump sideways into an empty square. These are not catastrophic events. Individually, they barely matter, but collectively, they introduce what scientists call stochasticity, small, random fluctuations that ripple through the system. At first, the effect is minor. A walker wanders slightly off the dominant path. It's noticeable, but the feedback mechanisms absorb it. The main lanes persist. The system looks resilient. But as more walkers deviate even slightly, the channels begin to wobble. A small random deviation can intersect a growing path at exactly the wrong place, creating a blockage or opening an alternative route. Once that happens, feedback takes over. Walkers are now attracted to the slightly stronger, newly emerging path, reinforcing it. A tiny deviation has become amplified, and suddenly the landscape shifts in a way that no linear extrapolation could have predicted. This is the essence of real-world tipping points, the combination of feedback and randomness. Small shocks accumulate quietly until the system reaches a threshold. Then, with almost no warning, the system reorganizes itself. The future no longer resembles the recent past. Stability vanishes. And yet, this isn't chaos in the sense of randomness. Without order, it's patterned, structured, and deterministic, just beyond our ability to predict from limited observations. Think of stock markets. A single unexpected tweet, a small sell-off, a slight technical glitch. Any of these tiny events can cascade, amplified by algorithms and human behavior, into a market swing that feels sudden, even catastrophic. Think of ecosystems. A few unusually hot days, a minor disease outbreak, or an invasive species introduction can tip a forest or reef into collapse. Think of viral content. A single unexpected share by the right person can turn a small video into a global phenomenon overnight. What we're seeing is a fundamental lesson about prediction. The rule that explains almost everything works only until the combination of feedback, accumulation, and randomness pushes the system over a threshold. Then it fails spectacularly. And when it fails, it feels like magic, luck, or chaos, but in reality, It's the inevitable result of the underlying structure. In our Walker world, this means that lanes once reliable can vanish in a blink, replaced by entirely new patterns shaped by tiny deviations. Predictable behavior coexists with the potential for radical change. The rule "the future resembles the recent past" is still at work, it just operates alongside mechanisms that make abrupt shifts unavoidable. Understanding this is critical. Once we see how randomness interacts with feedback and tipping points, we can recognize why the same rule underlies earthquakes, pandemics, social media virality, financial crashes, and even personal habits. The world looks smooth and predictable until it isn't, and the moments when the rule fails aren't exceptions. They are the rule manifesting in full, dramatic force. Next, we will explore how this principle scales from tiny walkers to entire societies, economies, and ecosystems, revealing a hidden pattern that links everything from falling droplets to global crises. Now that we've seen how simple rules, feedback, and randomness interact in a tiny digital world, the next step is to zoom out. Imagine taking the same principles and applying them not to walkers on a grid, but to entire societies, ecosystems, markets, and climates. The same mechanisms that produce sudden shifts in our toy universe operate everywhere invisible, powerful, and often misunderstood. Consider financial markets. Traders make decisions based on past trends, much like our walkers following traces. Each trade leaves a trace in the market, price movements, sentiment, and signals that influence the next trade. Feedback amplifies these signals. A small shift in investor confidence can snowball into a boom or, just as easily, into a crash. Random events, a leaked memo, a viral tweet, a geopolitical incident can act as the tiniest deviation, triggering massive reorganization. The rule "the future resembles the recent past" works beautifully until the system reaches a tipping point, and then it collapses almost instantaneously. Ecosystems operate on the same principle. A forest grows predictably year after year, trees filling gaps, species interacting in seemingly stable cycles. But accumulate stress, drought, invasive species, disease, and the forest reaches a threshold. A single spark can ignite a wildfire that reshapes the entire landscape. The rule seems violated, yet it was quietly operating all along, silently guiding growth until the tipping point was crossed. Social networks provide another striking example. Ideas, memes, and viral content spread along the traces left by previous sharers. Feedback amplifies what's popular. Most content fizzles out quietly, but occasionally, a tiny anomaly, a retweet from the right influencer, a misinterpreted post triggers explosive virality. Suddenly, what was predictable yesterday is completely transformed today. The same invisible rule underlies both stability and the sudden, chaotic flare of attention. Even human behavior and habits follow this pattern. Our routines, daily choices, and small habits accumulate traces in our environment and in our minds. They create feedback loops. The more we repeat a behavior, the more entrenched it becomes. But small disruptions, illness, stress, new opportunities can cascade through our personal systems, creating abrupt shifts in lifestyle or mindset. The future suddenly diverges from the recent past, leaving us feeling shocked or unprepared. The common thread is clear. Across domains, systems are stable for long periods, guided by the same invisible rule. Until accumulation, feedback, and random deviations push them past a critical threshold. At that moment, the world doesn't become random, it becomes reorganized. Patterns emerge, old ones vanish, and the cycle begins again. Recognizing this hidden structure changes how we see prediction. We stop treating sudden changes as anomalies or exceptions to the rule. Instead, we understand them as inevitable consequences of the rule itself. Stability and instability are not opposites. They are two sides of the same coin, produced by the interplay of continuity, feedback, and randomness. By scaling the Walker model up, we see the universality of this principle. It connects droplets falling from leaves, viral videos, financial crashes, forest fires, political upheavals, and personal transformations. All obey the same fundamental dynamics, predictable trends, accumulating feedback, tipping points, and sudden reorganization. Next, we'll examine the practical implications of this insight, how understanding the rule can help us anticipate surprises, design resilient systems, and even harness tipping points for positive change, rather than being blindsided by them. Understanding this hidden rule isn't just an intellectual exercise, it has real-world power. Once you recognize the interplay of predictability, feedback, and tipping points, you start seeing where you can anticipate change, intervene in systems, and even shape outcomes. The first insight is deceptively simple: stability is temporary and sudden change is inevitable. Take organizations, for example. Companies often assume that yesterday's performance predicts tomorrow's. Growth seems linear and efficiency feels permanent. But in complex systems markets, supply chains, teams' feedback loops amplify small changes, and randomness introduces surprises. A minor shift in consumer behavior, a small production hiccup, or an overlooked competitor innovation can cascade, transforming success into crisis seemingly overnight. Leaders who understand tipping points don't ignore trends. They monitor underlying stress, track feedback loops, and identify thresholds before they snap. The second insight is about preparing for disruption without over-predicting it. The rule teaches us that you can perfectly forecast exact moments of change, but you can anticipate where change is likely. By mapping dependencies, feedback loops, and accumulations of stress, you create early warning systems. Engineers do this in infrastructure, ecologists in ecosystems, and epidemiologists in pandemics. They don't predict the exact day a bridge might fail or a virus might spike, but they can identify pressure points and intervene early. The third insight applies to personal growth and habits. Just as walkers leave traces that attract others, our actions create feedback loops in our own lives. Small, consistent behaviors, exercising, learning, reaching out socially, compound over time, creating paths that shape our future selves. Yet minor deviations, skipping a workout, ignoring a relationship, procrastinating on a project, can ripple through these feedback loops and create tipping points that shift our trajectory. Recognizing this dynamic empowers us to manage small changes proactively rather than reacting only after collapse. A fourth insight is about opportunity. The same tipping point dynamics that make systems fragile also make them incredibly sensitive to small, well-timed interventions. In social movements, a few well-placed actions can spark wide adoption. In ecosystems, a single restoration effort can push a degraded system back towards stability. In business, a clever innovation or targeted decision can trigger exponential growth. Understanding where the system is near a threshold lets you leverage these moments deliberately rather than stumbling into them by accident. Finally, the overarching lesson is humility. The rule that explains almost everything is also the rule that can mislead. We must respect the limits of prediction while embracing the patterns underlying sudden change. Stability and instability are not opposites, they are part of the same continuum. By seeing the invisible structure beneath both, we gain clarity, resilience, and strategic insight. Our walkers may be digital and simple, but they illuminate a universal truth. The world is a complex web of feedback, accumulation, and tipping points. The future often looks like the past, but only until it doesn't. Recognizing that duality changes everything about how we navigate uncertainty, plan for the future, and understand the forces shaping our world. Next, we will bring it all together in the final section, synthesis and conclusion, where we connect the rule, its failures, and its insights into a single, unforgettable takeaway. We began this journey with a simple observation. There is a rule that governs almost everything, the assumption that the future will look like the recent past. It is a rule so embedded in our thinking that we barely notice it, yet it shapes weather predictions, market forecasts, viral trends, personal habits, and even the movement of water droplets. For long stretches of time, it works beautifully. Patterns hold, trends continue. The world feels stable, predictable, and knowable. But as we have seen, the rule is not infallible. Systems accumulate hidden stress. Feedback amplifies small differences. Random deviations creep in. And then, suddenly, the rule fails. A forest catches fire, a stock market collapses, a viral video explodes, or a personal habit collapses into chaos. The future no longer resembles the past. What seemed certain is gone. This is the tipping point in action, predictable until it isn't. The digital walkers we imagine provide a window into this dynamic. Simple rules, traces, feedback loops, randomness all combine to produce landscapes that are orderly and chaotic, stable and fragile, predictable and surprising. These micro-level rules scale up to real-world phenomena, economies, ecosystems, social networks, climates, and even our inner lives operate under the same principles. Every stable system contains within it the seeds of sudden transformation. Understanding this rule has profound implications. First, it reframes how we think about prediction. The goal is no longer to perfectly forecast the future that is impossible, but to understand the conditions that make abrupt change likely. By mapping feedback loops, accumulations, and thresholds, we can anticipate where systems are vulnerable, where interventions will have the greatest impact, and where randomness may tip the balance. Second, it changes how we approach resilience. Systems that appear stable may be brittle. Those that look chaotic may be robust. Recognizing tipping points allows us to build flexibility, redundancy, and adaptability into everything from infrastructure to organizations to personal routines. We begin to see fragility and strength not as absolutes, but as positions along a continuum shaped by feedback and thresholds. Finally, the rule teaches us humility and awe. Sudden shifts are not accidents, nor are they violations of order. They are the natural consequences of deeply embedded structures. Stability and instability are two sides of the same coin, and our understanding of one illuminates the other. By embracing this duality, we gain the power to navigate uncertainty, act strategically in complex environments, and appreciate the hidden dynamics shaping our world. So, the rule that explains almost everything and fails spectacularly in certain moments is both a guide and a warning. It reminds us that life, nature, and society are rarely linear. Change often arrives quietly, accumulates unseen, and then erupts in sudden, transformative waves. Recognizing this pattern doesn't eliminate surprises, but it allows us to meet them with insight rather than shock. In the end, the world is a dance between order and chaos. The future often mirrors the past until it doesn't, and the moments when it doesn't are where possibility, creativity, and transformation emerge. The rule that explains almost everything is, paradoxically, also the rule that teaches us the most about the unexpected. If the rule that the future resembles the past governs so much of what we observe, and yet fails so spectacularly, what does that tell us about our place in the world? It suggests that our reality is neither fully predictable nor entirely chaotic. It is a delicate balance, a dance between continuity and disruption, order and transformation. Recognizing this duality is not just an intellectual insight, it is a philosophical revelation. Consider the nature of knowledge itself. We crave certainty. We build models, make forecasts, and plan our lives as if the near future were a mirror of what has just occurred. And often, this works. We navigate cities, manage projects, and interact with others successfully because much of life is governed by continuity. Yet, the very act of relying on predictability blinds us to the thresholds lurking beneath the surface. The moments when the rule fails remind us that knowledge is provisional, always incomplete, and that reality is far more dynamic than our intuitions allow. There is also a profound ethical dimension. Understanding feedback, tipping points, and sudden shifts forces us to reconsider how we intervene in systems. Actions that seem small, trivial, or harmless can have cascading consequences. A choice made without awareness of feedback loops can amplify harm or, conversely, create extraordinary opportunity. This awareness challenges us to act with humility, foresight, and responsibility, recognizing the interconnectedness of all systems: social, ecological, technological, and personal. On a more personal level, the rule teaches patience and perspective. Life often feels linear, routines, habits, and relationships appear stable, but beneath the surface, small decisions, tiny deviations, and accumulated choices are quietly shaping the trajectory of our lives. When sudden shifts occur, career changes, unexpected opportunities, crises, they are not random. They are the natural expression of accumulated forces. Understanding this helps us navigate uncertainty with grace, embracing change as an inevitable and meaningful part of existence rather than a source of fear. And yet, there is wonder in these dynamics. The same mechanisms that make systems fragile also create beauty, innovation, and novelty. Forests regenerate after fires, economies evolve after crises, societies adapt to disruptions, and our personal growth often accelerates after moments of upheaval. The interplay between stability and disruption is not something to resist, it is the engine of life's creativity. So, as we close this exploration, remember this: the rule that explains almost everything and fails when it matters most is a guide, a warning, and a mirror. It reminds us that life is a balance between the predictable and the unexpected, that change is both inevitable and meaningful, and that the moments when the past fails to predict the future are often the moments that define us. The world is not a machine to be fully understood. It is a living, dynamic system governed by hidden rules, feedback loops, and tipping points. By recognizing these patterns, we gain clarity, resilience, and a sense of awe. In the end, the beauty of life lies not in perfect prediction, but in our ability to navigate its uncertainty with insight, courage, and wonder.